Good morning. And we are live with Brittany Dwyer. Welcome to Coffee with Developer Dave. Brittany, it's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I'll play off the name. It's time to disco, right? Let's get at it.
That's
Uh,
right.
Brittany is an entrepreneur, a product manager, an event curator, MBA, professional product manager, and a 2022 Arch Grants recipient. She delivers an incredible employee experience and client experience in an easy and addressable way with her company, Disco. It allows teams to discover, book, and pay for engaging group experiences and all rewards all in one place. Brittany, how did you land on Disco, the concept, and coming out of that kind of product management and global marketing background? Uh, where do you see this platform going?
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. So I launched Disco and everyone always asks about the name, but so I'll explain that. But I was kind of trying to think of like what's the Uber of events, right? And that's how I kind of landed on Disco. And now everyone says I'm gonna play in the disco. So that's kind of interesting. But
Yeah.
my background is actually in hospitality. So coming to St. Louis, like a lot of college grads, I was wondering kind of what's my next step? What am I going to do? So I worked for local restaurants, a Top Chef, Gerard Craft in St. Louis, and was really just like immersed in the hospitality scene. And that's where I actually kind of fell in love with delivering a great customer experience, like engaging, um, with customers and just having those conversations. But then after getting my master's, and I have an emphasis in project management. So I was like, well, I guess I better, join the real world and get this corporate job. So I went and did that and worked in a variety of roles focused on, project management, but then got into the software development space. So was kind of managing software developers and implementing programs like mostly customer facing in the digital marketing space. And, also have a passion for that and learning how to take, I kind of bridged my like background in hospitality, delivering great experiences, and actually was able to apply that from a digital technology standpoint. And, what do people wanting to see whenever they interact with your product? So I did that for about 8 years and, had a great corporate job and was really losing sleep over disco because I was still that person that people would say, hey, I'm in St. Louis for a weekend. What do I do? I've got 10 people. It was a lot of people were still asking me group focused stuff because I had planned events at restaurants. Um, and so I realized quickly, like, there's no way to just like book a cool private dining room. Why is that so hard? So that's where it kind of
Yeah.
started. Um, and just, why is access to this so hard? So that was kind of the catalyst for starting Disco and just took the leap. It's been 4 years ago since I quit my job and started working full time, like on the company. Um, and we have gone through kind of like a pretty big evolution with the company. It started off as like an Airbnb marketplace, like I said, pretty private dining focused and focused on the relationship with the vendors. But we started getting a ton of bookings. Like we launched the company during COVID, and then which people thought I was absolutely crazy, but I was like, no, like this is still a need. Like this is
Yes.
we're going to have the other side of this. And we sure enough did. And a big part of that I was seeing was companies were booking events for their teams, their clients, and they would book one and then they would say, like, what's the next thing that we should do? And they were coming and like really looking for that concierge experience, but also that like prescriptive approach to what's actually working, like what's going to drive conversation. And so I have really spent the past few years not only, digging into delivering a great product and relationships with the customers, but truly understanding the space. And, when we're hosting, when we're coming together in person, what does that look like to move the needle? So as we move forward, our focus really is on employee and client engagements, but supporting the companies as like that trusted resource
Mhm.
to kind of write their recipe around what it looks like to come together in person.
I think that's such a much needed resource in St. Louis. I think you hear all the time about how we're a foodie town, there's all these neat things to do. Um, but for whatever reason, we don't have that informal or even concierge service to curate those things. And because everything is not, I can't just go down to Times Square and go do a lot of the cool stuff, which Times Square is touristy, but you get the idea. Having that service seems like such a value. What do you see the kind of the continuing feedback and evolution of that as we come out of COVID and some of these concepts that have been kind of up, down, disrupted, open, closed start to stabilize across downtown and I guess the city and region?
Yeah, so you're like in terms of feedback of the users and kind of what they're seeking. Well, so Tours and Pours, I know was a catalyst for this, and that's a good example. And hearing directly from employees, like, people are coming back to the office, and a lot of people are like, "Okay, what do I do?"
Mm,
And the companies are trying to be a good resource for that. But people are like trying to connect with each other, and we saw a lot of people from the same company coming to separate dates with kind of their like core colleague group. Um, and so they're coming back to the office, but they're not necessarily feeling connected to the community. And we're seeing that a lot with individuals too. Like people are in general, as a blanket statement, people are seeking community. There are a lot of groups and organizations popping up to kind of ease that need. But at the end of the day, it's people are looking for things that call to them, and they want to support local. But for some reason, it has felt a little bit harder, and there has been that disconnect. So I think that's kind of the number one thing that I'm seeing is now that we people are coming back to the office or wanting to be out more in their community. What does that look like for them as people?
one of the things I've observed, because hospitality is something that I participated in for during COVID, during the same time you were launching Disco out in Herman, Missouri. And one of the things I noticed was the trend seems to have shifted away from if you build it, they will come and consume, right? That think of the shopping mall framework of put them all in a big space and capture as much economy as you can get to I think last year one of the top business books was Unreasonable Hospitality, and it's the experience has flipped to how can we create almost a tapestry of experiences that can be curated time and time again. Almost like if you go to the St. Louis Art Museum, you visit the same museum, but you can go to a different wing, and you could have a totally different experience depending on how it's being curated. Are you seeing that I'll say individualization of that experiential marketing in the work that you're doing?
Yes. So, one, I kind of want to give some examples of businesses that I do think are doing it well and some
Yeah.
examples of that. So, Omen Coffee Shop downtown is an example of that. They're building a brand, but also building a community, and their events and activations are centered around the brand that they're building. So, not only do they have, they're at this point, I think you can go in and just get free drip coffee because they're like, we're a place that you can go and they want to build a feeling. And I do think that's delivering hospitality. There's, other restaurant groups in town that you always know that, that expectation will be there that you can have a great meal every single time. But I do think it's the desire of the consumer to kind of have that like expectation that is always going to be great, but always getting presented something new. Like, what's the new event? What's the new experience? And, even if it's something as simple as like making a seasonal menu, people are, I think that's what it's all about. It is about the experience. So you're seeing a lot more from a marketing perspective of hammering that stuff home. And businesses are trying to find their voice and how to go about that, the frequency at which you do that. So something that we do is both on the like end customer side as well as vendors is we help think through that as well. So whenever we're putting together kind of recommendations for the companies of what they should do, we're looking at like trending events, trending marketing things that actually have maybe just been a ticketed event or a theme maybe in other cities, and which vendors can deliver that on you know, on more of like a bigger group level. And we're actually putting forth those recommendations under client engagement, team building, and helping the vendors actually think through how to price those things. And yes, you can make this accessible to groups. So that's something that we're really passionate about, is thinking about how can you kind of keep reusing that energy that you get from maybe a ticketed event to kind of become a core part of your business and what you can offer. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking about, I've been to Oman, I've talked to the owner, and one of the things that I think they're doing that I think we can really take as a lesson for anything we're trying to do with downtown, the city of St. Louis, and otherwise, is that it would be easy to say that it's just a coffee shop, but it's not, right? It's a coffee shop, it's an event space, it's a fellowship group, it's a run club, it's a community garden. There's almost a philosophy around being a part of that community, which I think is part of the growing pains and the struggles we have on downtown. And I think you highlighted it so well, which is it's easy for people who've been working in downtown or the city of St. Louis to forget that we sort of unplugged and restarted again, and now we've got to reopen all of our browser tabs. And it's it's curious that it's difficult to execute, but I think if we think of downtown as exactly those things, a community space, a second space, a third space, an adjacent friend, the friend next door's living room, a place we want to hang out, a place where there's things going on, an organic culture and experience starts to emerge. And that's a lot more attractive to people coming repeatedly and experiencing the same thing, slightly different over and over, right? You almost imagine a great restaurant and the seasonal menu. It's the same place, but we're just moving the dial just a little bit one way, maybe a little bit back the other way, so that the experience and the expectation is the same, but we get a slightly different product that keeps us curious.
Yeah. And it is about, creating the space for conversation, even if it's like people like follow and get connected to something that is authentic, that has a vision. And I do
Yes.
think we are kind of grappling with what is like our identity, what is the vision for downtown? And obviously that's been like a hot topic. And what's the vision for our city? And that comes back to like the people that are here that are delivering great things. And what I would love to see is just like them at the forefront of, we have people that have invested heavily in starting their business here. It is a lot to get a small business off the ground. So when we can amplify those voices and kind of put them in the front and center, and give them the opportunity. Tours and Pours is a great example of that. And now we've done that multiple times and it's expected. We sold out every single date last time. And it's just,
Awesome.
you definitely have to go to one because the sentiment, it truly does blow me away. Like you are there and people are connecting with each other and it's all over the common thread of like, wow, I lived down here. I was, worked down here for 8 years. I didn't know this was there. And that's in reference to businesses that have been there for 10 years and people are walking in and their mind is blown. And so it doesn't always have to be the new hot shiny toy, right? There
Right.
are great things that are already there. It's just, access and making people aware of them and also getting people there. And I think once people feel the spirit of that, understand the rich history of downtown, which the architecture piece has been huge, like that makes people feel connected and feel like there's a story behind the places and the people that they're supporting.
St. Louis, I think you touched on the architecture as a great kind of foil for this. Is St. Louis as a culture, as a place, as a built environment is both deep and wide in its history, relevance, and availability of experience. One of the most interesting things I've been thinking about recently is that a lot of people read the book Experience Economy, and this is an idea that's been around for over a decade. And I missed for a long time that the update to that is actually the transformation economy. And I think all the work you're doing in experiential marketing 100% facilitates the idea of a transformation economy. And you touched on it very much with, what's the vision of downtown? The vision of downtown for people to buy in has to communicate what will I become by experiencing and living in this place? And there's not a singular answer to that, but I think everything we do has to facilitate some manner of transformation that has an output that is predictable and that people say, I would like to be a part of that. That's a very compelling proposition for me to go from where I am now to transform into what this place can turn me into. You see the same thing. I use the example all the time of it used to be that if you were grew up on a farm in Iowa and you wanted to be in movies, you have to go to Hollywood. If you wanted to be on Broadway, you had to kind of live six to a loft in Manhattan. And so the question I always ask is, what is that for St. Louis? What is it that this place will transform you into that we are world class at? And I think we're still trying to find our way to what that might be. What do you think about that? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, quite a few ideas. I mean, well, one, just to kind of tee off of that is, a huge driver of like the success of the downtown is like our businesses there. Is it a thriving community and thriving culture? And obviously our clients are corporate clients. So we're trying to think about connecting them in. And I mean, there's all sorts of statistics around. I think it's like 70% of I think your retention rate goes up like 70% if your employees feel connected to their local community. The spend and
Mm,
economy from people
wow.
that are working in spaces, I want to say an average it's like right under $200 a week spent at local businesses on average when you have like a thriving culture. So I mean, to me, I'm just thinking about like what's kind of the constant, activations that we're doing downtown. What's the space that we're creating? A big trend that we're seeing with companies is requesting family friendly um, activations and experiences. And, people are very protective with their time. And going back to what you're saying about like, who am I going to become as a person? So we kind of like talk about the whole life. Hey, as a company, when you're planning events, are you thinking about people's, are we doing things around wellness every year? Are we doing things around professional development? And it doesn't have to be rigid and formal. It means getting access to experts in our city that can talk about certain topics. um, I think downtown, it doesn't feel like super family centric. There are things to do for family, but it does feel very attraction heavy. So whenever I'm thinking, about these families, if you go to Tower Grove Park on a Saturday morning, that's just a natural community. Like I don't know if you've been there lately, but
Oh yeah.
it's thriving and it's busy every time. And that's why people are kind of taking that Tower Grove's market and trying to actually, have them come and replicate it. So I think it's just finding what that buzz and hum is around whenever you have the retail, the food, everything kind of coming together. How does that make you feel, kind of just as a whole? And yeah, it's my thoughts there.
What do you think? What's changing or what's exciting about experiential marketing? I think we just touched on this, but either from a technology standpoint or the demands of the customers, what opportunities are available now that maybe 2 years ago or 5 years ago would have just been unthinkable?
Well, I mean, your reach just in general with social media and digital marketing tools and be able to spin up concepts, quickly. I think that's, using AI, you can like any business owner can essentially pull ideas. So that's where it's gonna go back to the
Mm,
execution of that. I think that again, like what we're probably going to see in the next couple of years is like information overload, opportunity overload, because it's like, wow, I can do this. This is what I need to be doing. But I think that it goes back to like if you're a business hosting these things, taking a thoughtful approach, right? Like you're doing things that kind of fall in line with your brand. So I think the opportunities is just doing things in a repetitive nature, giving people like you know, something to expect. Tours and Pours is a good example of that. We're doing it again just because it works. So, um, just to kind of touch on like what that actually involves is people come and we hit 3 to 4 stops in a night. Um, there's food and drink experiences. We intentionally make the itinerary a surprise. So whenever you're like going to the next stop, like they know where we're starting, right? It's like we're starting
mhm.
at this point. Um, but it's just kind of their like it's a surprise and delight all night long. And we go into each of the businesses and they have an opportunity to kind of do like a little tasting or hear from the owner. And then along the way, there's an architectural history tour from the Historical Society talking about St. Louis architecture and history. And we do try to weave that into the actual stops. For instance, like Hotel St. Louis, like amazing architecture and kind of the background of that building and kind of weave that in as well. And then the end stop always has live music, and that's with a local artist, musician. We're going to weave in some artists probably into the next series. So it comes down to like from start to finish, like one, people are getting an experience the entire time and it feels very cohesive, like from stop to stop. And they're learning something new people want to learn something new. That's where you're seeing the clubs around. Like there's a knitting club in St.
Yeah.
Louis. And so I think it's when you're planning something experiential, always thinking about like what's the value prop that I'm sharing? Like not how does it benefit my company, but what's the value proposition I'm sharing with the people that are going to take the time to come.
I think that's wonderful. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking so often when we think about real estate development, when we think about downtown development, when we think about the city of St. Louis as you know, and even the region as we have a demographic decline and there's all these struggles, um, it's very easy and very safe to think about things as kind of blocking and tackling physical built environment structures. But I love the idea of making decisions around specifically downtown as an experiential city because it's how much better and more enticing is it to be invited into an adventure just exactly like you described. I can go, I'm going a few places. It feels like I've been a dozen places, right? I go for 2 hours. It feels like I've been there for 2 days. I see live music. I go, I eat, I drink, I do all these things. And so I've done a weekend's worth of things in a short period of time. That experience will carry with me far longer than a quick trip downtown to go to a restaurant for one thing and then I'm going out, right? And I think if as we imagine downtown and as we emerge into whatever the next iteration is, I think that's a terrific framework to think of what does it mean to be an experiential city that is not simply based on come down here and consume and then go back to wherever you came from. And
Right.
I'm imagining things they're doing like with the fashion fund. You know, in your point on the knitting is if we're going to have a fashion fund, does that mean that a lot of people need to learn how to sew? And are there lots of people who might do a sewing class that would then support the business that's selling sewn garments? Right. And I think you're seeing that in a lot of really small, kind of smaller town niche businesses where they are doing the clothing making, the clothing design, and the class to do the clothing, and then they might do have somebody come in and talk about how do you design your own clothes. And what you get out of that is exactly we're going back to Omen is we have a second space, a third space, a educational resource, a community engagement, and it takes some thought, but it doesn't take that much more effort because you're doing things you're already doing, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's yeah, some other good examples of that is there's, Descendant Boutique, like, in Webster Groves, you can book a styling session, and they'll, help with your individual style, but then that's applied to, like, your actual shopping credit,
Mm.
and that's just an example of, like, these business owners, like, are experts in their space, so you are gonna be seeing more of that. Freestyle Creative, she, is opening up downtown, as kind of a, kind of central hub for connection, community with local artists and, creative workshops, and so I'm really excited for that to open. It's something that people can just walk in, learn something new, get their hands dirty, and, when you're looking at other cities and whenever I go and I feel like, "Wow, this is a great place to be," like, I was just at, outside of San Francisco, now I'm drawing a blank, in the valley, but they had this little, like, entire kind of brick street blocked off. Every single restaurant had patio tables that were kind of into the street, people were walking, and it wasn't like a huge area, but I just kind of once I finished dinner, then I was walking around, I popped into, like, a couple retail shops, and it wasn't like some crazy atmosphere, but it felt like I was there in that area. And we did used to have that. Like I'd go to Wash Ave, whenever you're thinking about nightlife. And so I think it's finding that energy and that spirit around, you know, like what is it as a whole and not this kind of siloed little pockets of things that I do. And I think that's where cities that do that have been successful.
I like the idea of the city as an adventure that also welcomes you into the opportunity for serendipity, and which is kind of what you described, right? It's I go to this place to go to dinner, and then I walk around, I take a little stroll, and there's these neat shops, and I pop into the shop, and it it adds to the vibrancy of what's going on in a way that is organic, and it feels like you are entering other people's community and space, which is why we travel. That's what we're looking for, and I think that really is a key to downtown. I love this idea of borrowing from other cities. What other cities or what other experiential aspects that people are doing elsewhere do you think we should be borrowing in St. Louis?
Oh man. Well, so one that multiple people have sent me, which I think is interesting because it's clearly like, oh, you're the person that does this. There's the lectures on tap that
Yes.
is is the pop up. And again, I've had multiple people send me that. I do think it's a great idea and have some things in mind for that. But where professors come and give kind of a lecture while you're like drinking at a bar and connecting, I think that's an interesting concept. um, let's see, Austin. I love Rainy Street's been around for a long time, but I just read something about, it's grown in popularity and it's like doing really well. And that's again a whole strip of open air, like they kind of feel like houses. I don't know if you've been there. But it's such a fun, everyone's got like an outdoor bar.
Yeah.
So I think these kind of like market style areas where everyone's got a patio, it's kind of outdoor centric. I think that always draws people out. Um, so yeah, that's something interesting. I think as a whole, we could be doing more with the arch. Like I was just talking to someone the other day, that's like such a central point of St. Louis, but it's like not that I'm constantly wanting to go down there with my family. And so then I was asking myself why. And you can go down there with your family, there's a photographer there that'll take your picture, but it's like, why can't I just go down there and pick up a picnic basket and have a picnic with my family at any time? Like, why isn't there constantly yoga? Like, welcoming yoga instructors. If you just want to always have this going on a weekend, and if you happen to be walking through, you can pop in and hop in a class, or what are those things that really could be building more community down there? It doesn't have to just be a tourist organization. It can be a central part of bringing people to the city. And the same with City Garden. Have some thoughts there, but I feel like there's a lot of opportunity. There's that building there, goes pretty much unactivated.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think, other cities are doing a good job of that. And I think, we're on our way. There is a lot of optimism and yeah, I guess that's kind of what I've got there.
What are some of the marketing, experiential marketing, messaging, or otherwise that we need to leave in the past, that we need to kind of move beyond, or maybe adjust the way we're communicating them as we try to welcome people back to downtown, or try to entice them to move from places like Dallas, St. Louis, or Dallas, Austin, Houston, uh, Phoenix, Chicago, or elsewhere to St. Louis?
Huh, that's a good question. Like what, like leaving behind? I don't know. It's like it's hard for me to say because again, whenever I'm thinking about like what has that message been, like, I mean, I don't know what your opinion is on what it has been, but I can't think of like a clear message, that there has been in the past 5 years. Um, but I think like the live, work, play, leaning into that. I guess I would say like the opportunity is leaning into that. Like people want to live in a spot where they can have their amenities, you know, build community and kind of always know what to expect. So I don't know. I don't think I have a good answer for like anything that we need to necessarily leave behind. I think it's more just that we've just been a little bit lacking in terms of what our story is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I like that idea that perhaps there's not much to leave behind, but that we just need to have a thesis or a point of view because the message has gotten mixed. And I think I live in the county in St. Louis, and so I hear some of this too, which is downtown a neighborhood, a business district, a entertainment district, a vacation place? What is it? And I think, when we think about decision fatigue and consumer decisions, the easiest thing is to do nothing. So if I'm confused about what it is, then it's asking a lot of me to listen to the explanation or to think through it myself. It really is our obligation as marketers to think about what makes it so obvious that this is the choice for you. And I think David
right.
Ogilvy said, if it doesn't sell, it's not advertising. And so maybe that's what we really need to be thinking about is how are we getting sales? And by sales, we mean people voting with their feet and their dollars to come downtown, stay downtown, come not just once for a ball game every year, but over and over because they see all the experiential things and they're buying into that transformation. How does that land with you?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. You're the best marketer is the people that live there. Like, there's a feeling and a spirit about, like, wanting to live in New York and the larger cities. So it's like, it's great that we can still focus on tourism, but ultimately, like, the best draw for tourism is people that live here that are gonna say, "Come visit me in St. Louis," versus, like, "I'm gonna come visit you in your city because it's a great place to live." So we have to take care of the people that are here. Obviously, it's great to, like, take care of our tourists, but we have to satisfy what people are getting when they live here and the neighborhood. I mean, that's my opinion on it because then they're going to say, like, come visit here. You need to move here too. So, what are we doing to make our constituents advocates of our city, and how do they feel like their voice is being heard and ideas that they put forth are actually coming to fruition? I mean, there's just been some amazing crowdsource opportunities. One that comes to mind is, um, Trust Tech Artista did kind of that like Lutopia. And I went there feeling like, oh my gosh, this feels like futuristic and optimistic, like these greenscapes and these urban gardens and rooftop gardens. And then that was however many years ago, and you go downtown and it's like doesn't feel green, and it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like, it feels like the basic necessities sometime. And this is not, every city has this problem, but it's like, let's start with the basics and make this a pleasant place to be. We don't need construction cones on every single street at the same time. Maybe we start and finish one project so when people feel come down here and live down here, they don't feel like it's always like an inconvenience. Kansas City ripped out a bunch of their parking meters, for example, downtown. It's a sentiment whenever I go there to do business. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. I feel it that I'm going to go just park. It's a simple
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
then, so it's like, it's just, I forget who was saying in an interview lately. It's like, it's the care. Like, you feel if somebody really cares, and, what's the care and compassion that we're putting into our own city, and it's thinking of those little thoughtful things about, like, is it convenient to come here? Period. If it's not convenient to park, and almost everyone you talk to would say that same thing. So, okay, let's, like, immediately change that. So we have to move faster, we have to try new things, um, and just show people that we're rolling out things for them, and I think they're really, I don't see that that's happened.
And I get the impression that there is a group of young leaders, and I'm including you in this, that are getting to this point where the speed we are moving at a speed and a velocity where we're willing to try things and fail at it and say that didn't work, let's try it again, let's figure it out. Whereas I think, when I think of I arrived in St. Louis about 10 years ago, and when I think of when I arrived and before that, and I came from Dallas where we had some of the same things happening, earlier in the 2000s, where there's an idea where if we implement a program, it will sort of sustain itself, right? Like once we've got the program, then we're good. And I think everything is moving so much faster. The consumer tastes are changing, and the attention span obviously is decreasing. And so um, I think that's where you one of the things that I think we need to change, that I think is really should be a relief to most of our civic organizations, is that if we do the work to create the marketplace that will create the experiences like you talked about, then the job of the civic organizations is to just keep the market spinning and keep it moving and maybe infuse a little something into it every now and again. But sometimes if you get out of the way and to your point about the parking, you remove the decision fatigue and you create relief, and you create a sense that this is a place that wants me here. This isn't a place that is looking to just extract from me for its own existence. I think that it's one of those things where, is that the reality? No. But is that the perception and that's what it feels like? Yes. And so, from a customer standpoint, that's really all that matters. You can explain all of the reasons why parking meters are important to the budget of a city, But if I'm visiting from out of town and I have to stress about where I'm going to park, am I going to get a parking ticket? Then am I have to deal with that? You've immediately put me on outside of the open, welcoming exploration mode into panic, survival, and distress. And
Yes.
those are not buying behaviors. And I think that is, a lot of the issues in St. Louis, I think, boil down to behavioral economics, framing, and marketing. Um,
Yep.
and if we focus on changing those and letting the market do its work, I think there is so much pent up demand that I think we will be shocked if we just kind of get out of the way and let the market do its thing. That all of the value propositions that we have here will come to fruition faster than I think we think.
Yeah. And so I was just at the zoo yesterday, and I don't know why this just came to mind, but, like, there was, like, 2 different times where I, like, walked up to the map at the zoo, and I was like, I've been to the zoo a million times, but I was just kind of like, I wanna get to this place." And within, like, 5 seconds, there was a person standing next to me, it's like,
Yeah.
"It looks like you need help." And I was like, it was such a relief, like, I had the map right there, I had the recipe right there. So it was like, I don't know, I took something from that where I was like, do we have enough of do we have these resources in our neighborhoods? Like, is it, somebody just kind of always walking like a security presence that is also engaging with the people there and being an advocate for the city and not just like a physical body? So that's interesting. And I think that it's empowering entrepreneurs. So thinking about things like if we have open space, that has been funded to do some kind of incubator work, is it saying like, hey, it's a coffee shop incubator and taking someone that wants to learn how to operate a coffee shop or like is, you know, doing something cool in that regard. And as long as they're serving the space and serving the community, that they can have the space for 6 months and learn how to start a business. Um, so it I think it's just more people taking risk and doing cool stuff and being okay if it's not like the big thing. We have to be doing things. I mean,
Yeah.
I almost bought a trolley, like full transparency. I almost bought a trolley a couple months ago. Like my mom was like, she was on board and because I forget there was a conversation going on about it. I was like, we do need a trolley downtown. Just running and being like, hey, here's our, top 20, we're going to take you to this neighborhood and we're going to like connect it. We're going to collect data, on where people are getting off. And so I didn't
I
do
think
it.
that
Like
was
I
my
have too much
post.
on my plate.
I think that's how we got connected. I think that was my first post about running a trolley on different corridors like in downtown and collecting the data of where people got off and seeing where people's.
Okay, that was it. After you post
Yeah.
that, I did not realize that was you. After you posted it, I literally hopped on Marketplace and there was a trolley for sale and I reached out to the guy and I was like, "No, someone has to do that." But then I was like, "I can't personally do that because I have too much on my plate." But it was like, why not? Like look at the money that's spent on stuff. Like paint an arch, like paint the loo, like give it a name and see what happens, in 6 months if you're like, you're gonna have a free place to get to all the neighborhoods in St. Louis and we're actually have an expert curated guide that is going to make sure you get off at at awesome stops and you're always going to have a great experience. So after you posted that, that's so funny. But I think there are a lot of people that have the propensity to move and take action. And I think leaning into that is going to be essential.
I love the idea. So when I was writing that, so again, going back to my time in Herman, one of the only reasons why Herman is able to really function the way it does now is because back in, gosh, maybe the 2010s, there was a guy that started the Herman Trolley Company, and
Hmm.
it reduced DWIs, it reduced accidents, it solved so many of that city's problems, and it increased their business astronomically because all of a sudden I didn't have to think about parking. I didn't have to think about driving. I didn't have to think about getting pulled over. I got on the trolley. I had a very nice trolley driver who was telling me a little bit of the history of the town and the wineries, and they dropped me off. And I knew that if I called them, they would come pick me up. And that level of certainty and that level of engagement just added a whole other layer to Herman. And I think, as you're saying this, I'm imagining we almost need like a Walt Disney for St. Louis, and maybe only downtown, who is imagineering these spaces to say, when you wait in line at Disneyland, you don't think to yourself, "My gosh, I've been here for 2 hours." There's something engaging, and they don't let you see how long it is, and so there's some imagineering I think we can really do. And to your point about even like a map or a guide, if you look lost at Disneyland, a character, a cleaner, or somebody comes up and approaches you. And so I think there's a way we can almost Disneyfy downtown that would be really exciting. I think even for people who are here and then also for people visiting. What do you think about that? How's that for an experience?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think, like, to your point, like, who's like, what's like the Walt Disney of St. Louis? Like, there's, I think, taking some dramatic leaps and like what's like buzzworthy, like something that we can do. It's like, you're gonna get that. I mean, I love it. I think, the trolley is a good start. Like, what is that thing that's making it just fun and convenient to be here? So I don't think it has to be everything all at once. I think we can
Right.
start taking like immediate steps to have resources, have people advocating for the city and being kind of like our little internal marketers. Like, what does that look like?
I think so much. I've mentioned it before. I think so much of what I experience is that our marketing is really public relations and communications, and we're explaining what's happening instead of doing the kind of the other side of that, which is uh, really the marketing and the sales, right? What's the experience? What's the emotion? What's the transformation you're going to feel when you come to this place? And again, I go all the way back to what you're doing with things like sips and pours is is that right? We are inviting and welcoming people into something they wouldn't otherwise do. Um, so along those lines, what are some of the coolest venues or under the radar spaces in St. Louis? And I'll add to that, what are some wish list spaces that you would love to have here?
Interesting. So, tours and pours, everyone was like, holy smokes, when we went into Thaxton Speakeasy. Like, that was definitely one that
Yeah.
got a big reaction. And, there's just a lot of history there, and it's a great spot. They make amazing cocktails, the best French 75 that I've had. Um, Trust Cocktail Bar downtown, which is in the Tech Artista co-working space. I think parking hinders them a ton, but it's an amazing bar. They've got a fantastic cocktail program. Um, it is a co-working space. It has all the things you want. It's got a rooftop space, so I think they're trying to find their marketing voice, but I do think it's an underrated space. I love going in there. People love that spot. Great for live music. Um, when thinking about downtown, everyone had a great time at the Passport Cocktail Bar. Another one where all on our survey results, whenever we posted those, the places that people talked about was when the hospitality was highest. And I think that's always interesting to go back to. It's like, again, you can make a great place. People want to feel that there's somewhere that's very authentic. So that was another spot. So this is just me thinking about downtown.
Mhm.
Gosh, the list is long. Vadero Wine Bar in Midtown is one of my favorite spots. Um, I don't know if I would call it underrated, but that's a great venue. There's the new nightclub in Cherokee Street is doing some really cool stuff. Like, you can go in that whole area of kind of Fox Park and Cherokee Street.
Yeah.
I did like a full night's itinerary actually for Valentine's Day, hit Clements Lock, dinner at Little Fox, drinks at Sippy, um, Shoes nightclub. And that's all in this like little radius. So I think they're doing a really great job. And that's a full day of planning. Wish list spaces. I've actually said this to some people. We did a concept of kind of like this corporate innovation hub. This is more tied to kind of what I'm doing. But just a place like where when people come to meet in St. Louis or business leaders know that they have a spot that's a community, a club, but also where they can like learn about the top topics. Like, how cool would it
Mm.
be if it's when you come to St. Louis, you can book an hour with the top entrepreneur that's going to talk to you about like trends in AI customer service. So, been kind of thinking about some things there and what that looks like. And outdoor spaces, again, I'm always getting requests whenever people are requesting events. Indoor, outdoor, is a big thing that's, like, lacking more of that and, like, kind of larger, activity community spaces. So those are kind of some of the things that I would, yeah, that'd be more my wish list.
So I think when we talk about venues and spaces, and I should have framed the question a little bit better, is
Oh, sorry.
when we think no, that's all right. When we think about venues and spaces, it's very easy for our minds to go to the ballroom size places. And you did
Yeah,
highlight a lot of I don't want to say hole in the wall, but kind of smaller niche restaurants and bars that don't have that huge footprint. Um, it is from a real estate development standpoint, obviously it is easier to have one tenant in one big space. We're seeing some disruption with things like food halls, but then you're still in a food hall. I
right,
was in Japan a couple years ago, and I can't get the idea out of these almost shoebox size venues where you have 5 people in a bar and a bartender. And the reality is in this market with labor, restaurant and labor and overhead costs, you can almost net as much out of a micro venue like that as you can operating, a huge caramel room right up at the Bissingers, where you've got a lot of overhead, you've got a lot of time where there is nobody there, or you have a lot of staff to do it. Are you seeing interest from either groups that you're talking to, individuals or businesses for those kind of shoebox size venues, or is there maybe a moderated size that is ideal that just isn't really met right now?
um, so we don't do, like, a ton of, like, super large events. Our average group size is probably, like, 25, and we do a lot of intimate stuff, and so most of our people come to us because they want something curated, and that's a lot of times where we, like, move to, what's trending, create that, like, recipe. Um, People want an experience even if it's, like, a small touch in a space that can hold, like, 25, and actually it is, like, harder than you think to find that, where it's, like, low-hanging fruit, easy to book, it's set up in a way that could be
Yeah.
private or semi-private. um, so, it's encouraging places, like, to think about that whenever, whenever they're opening. Meeting, I do think there could be more care put into, like, what does it look like for a company to come and meet for a day? Because we've done quite a few retreats that it's like it's a full day of activations where it's like they're gonna have to do like breakfast, lunch, like a meeting, step out and do a dinner and activity. I think we're lacking like creative, interesting meeting spaces. I think that could be a trend as people come back to the office and you're the 20-person company. I think what we would see is like, is it the coffee shop saying like, hey, this is a great place to work for a team, and we've actually reserved this table for teams to come in and work from, or the like this back area. I think we're going to see a lot more creativity around making spaces that weren't traditionally the core function. So personally, I like to see a lot more people doing that and making it because people want to go somewhere interesting and unexpected. If you're going to go to a conference room, you could just do that like at a traditional office.
Right.
So how are we reimagining the cool local business into an engaging conference like meeting experience? So um yeah, hoping that happens.
Yeah, I was thinking during COVID, one of the things that I recognized for even the retail that was going to go into the buildings I had is I was not going to build that space for a tenant who relied on pedestrian traffic. They had to benefit from that or figure out a way to bring people there, but they also had to have a digital footprint that was, some percentage of their business because unless and this is true I think for a lot of cities, unless you have a high enough density, it is really difficult to survive on serendipitous foot traffic alone. You really have to have a reason for people to come there, or some other business line that is e-commerce driven to drive that revenue. And I think the same thing is true even for some of these events. The way I think about, like, if I was going to open a restaurant today, I would not do a large format restaurant. I would be thinking about something like kitchen table. So the concept being, when I was in Hermit, I did this. I had a small restaurant. It was just me. I did everything. And what I would
Oh
do is
wow.
I would sit 6 or 7 couples at a long table. They've never met, but it's a fixed menu. They all get the same thing, and they end up leaving as friends. And I think concepts like that are a little bit more difficult and counterintuitive for like typical restaurateurs to do because that isn't the way people are trained to experience those things. But to your point about unique spaces, that's a unique space. Other things that I think I've seen done are there's a restaurant in Chicago and I can't remember the name, but they do a like a whole animal roast. So like they'll roast a whole goat
Mhm.
and then it's a, you know, but you buy a ticket. So you might be there with 50 people that you don't know, but you're all there for this dining experience, which adds, you know, as we know, dining adds a certain level of intimacy and connection that simply going to a bar doesn't have. You know, when
Oh,
you're
yeah.
breaking bread together, that creates connection and memory that is just unbeatable. So I hope that as we develop downtown and as we start to bring customers in, we can create those spaces because it'll make your job a lot easier. And it also, I think, just tighten the knit of that downtown community and be a place that people say, I want to go there. The same way you talked about is going on in Tower Grove.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we've hosted quite a few hog roasts, like, people love those. It's also, whenever we're thinking about menus, like, a reason people, like, love working with us and how we kind of help the vendors too is, like, we'll say you're getting the family style menu and, there was a dinner of 12 and it was like, you're getting the chef tasting with wine pairings, understand if people have any dietary restrictions, but there was something comforting about people sitting down and not looking at a menu and knowing it's like, you're about to get a menu that was chosen for you for this conversation, wine pairings that went with that. Um, and so yeah, it's that like intimate, prescriptive, but something that you could repeat. Kind of teeing off your chef experience. I'd love to see a space that is kind of more of like a home base for some of these chefs that have done kind of the in-home experiences and kind of pop-up concepts. But I think someone could kind of like
Oh
centralize that a
yeah.
little bit more. Um, and something other an interesting trend too, that I think that you would find interest in is we are helping quite a few companies that are coming back to the office that have actually invested in like the bar and community space at their office, thinking they're now going to be a place to host. And because people are like, we've made this investment in the office, like, how can we get more out of this space? But I think there's kind of like a lack of clarity and like direction of like what they're gonna be doing there. So we're kind of coming in and helping say like, yes, you can actually build a community within your office, but what does that look like whenever you're expecting people to come here? What are they getting? And how can we take a thoughtful approach around like you're the place where X happens, where every 2 months I know if I show up to a happy hour, I'm gonna have some experiential, or I'm going to like there's going to be a top industry speaker in the field that's like
Yeah.
they're giving me tips and I'm not just being sold to and someone's not just asking me to show up because you can't just ask people to show up anymore. It has to be you have to be like providing them with something and that's just the reality. So anyway, I think that's something that's I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That's a need. What's the elevated happy hour in office? Like what is that? What's the roadmap and the recipe for that for these companies too?
I think that I want to underscore that we can't just ask people to show up anymore. And I think it goes back to the example I gave earlier, which is the mall just asks you to show up and be there and just extract from you. We've got to be inviting people to come to a place where they're going to leave better off than they were, and that's the transformation economy. And that I think is on a very meta level, that's why cities like Dallas, Austin, Houston, Denver, Chicago are thriving and Nashville are thriving post pandemic is because people have a belief that if I show up to this place, I will become a different person that I think I want to be, and it is better than the person that I am today. And I think it's incumbent on St. Louis to figure out what that is, or if we feel like we know what it is, to communicate that and invite people into experience it in a very open way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, after going to South by Southwest, this has been a few years ago, I couldn't help I was like, I came back, like, feeling optimistic, but I was like, "I get it," why people say this. It's the core startup building downtown where you walk in and it's like the top businesses are like doing geospatial work like right there where you can walk in and like see what's going on and then you walk to the next floor and it's like entrepreneurs and residents who have like had a successful exit that you can get access to within a couple hours. And then it's the night happy hour that was like, this like really experiential art happy hour. Like, I don't even know how to describe it, with a DJ that was like so immersive. And then there was just like so many things going on where I was like, this it is a thriving city. And there was an overarching feeling, like, I don't know what the exact word is, but I did leave feeling like, wow, I wish we could find that. I think hopefully
Yeah,
we're on our way. But yeah, it's taking what's worked in other cities. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but I think you do a really
100%.
great job of that and sharing those ideas. So hopefully, yeah, we can continue in the right direction.
I'll tell you. So, I spent a lot of time in Dallas and Austin in the early 2000s, and actually on Monday, I'm interviewing the mayor, the former mayor of Dallas, Tom Leppert, who was there from 2007 to 2011.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I can tell you, as somebody who grew up in Los Angeles, who spent a lot of time in Dallas, and who's now here, is that one of the there's three things I would tell you culturally in Texas that to somebody from outside aren't apparent here. So one is you have a density, a density, and that's not just the net population, but a close proximity of the population, and it's a density of people who have open minds and open cultures. And I don't mean that from any intellectual or liberal sense. I mean that in terms of relationships. As much as we may not think it in St. Louis. This is a closed and insular culture. We expect people in St. Louis to have been from here and to be here forever, whereas in Dallas, Austin, Houston, Los Angeles, Scottsdale, New York, these are transient places. The expectation is that you and I might be friends for 6 months and then you'll go somewhere else. And so that speed of trust and that openness of relationship is so critical, because what it does is then what it leads to is open wallets. I don't have a lot of time to sit here and wait and keep my wallet and resources closed. I need to be open and collaborate, and I need to spend that money for that experience so that we can accelerate all of these things much faster. And I think when people go to dynamic places, that's what they're experiencing. It's the openness, open minds, open wallets, density of commerce and ideas. One of the
Mhm.
other things I would say is St. Louis has a very long institutional memory, very long. And it is very hard to have an innovative, vibrant, um, uh, consumer-driven economy where exciting things are happening when, if it fails, people never forget, and
Right.
and it makes people very risk averse. And I don't quite know how to change that, but I think recognizing it is number one, because if you say, if we start asking ourselves the question, oh, are we trying to avoid the pain of a failure 20 years ago, and so we're not going to do something today? That should be our first indication that no, maybe we should just go ahead and do it. And if it fails again, then we kind of know that's not for us. But let's figure out what's for us. And I think a lot of times when we talk about borrowing things from other places, um, it's easy to say, well, we're not Dallas, well, we're not Austin, well, we're not Denver, well, we're not Chicago. That's fine. Take the framework and figure out what it is for St. Louis, right?
Right.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Uh,
No, I
we're
agree. I mean, yeah, I know we're short on time. I wish, like, when the Rams money, like, came up and that conversation, I know it's still happening, but I was like, let's do, like, one dramatic thing, right? Like, let's rip out a road and plant a bunch of trees and, like, you
Yeah,
know, I just, like I said, I think people are yearning for that, like, seeing, like, I know we've made a ton of big moves, like, obviously, there's been a bunch of big investment, but that does take years. What's something that we can just roll out and show people, like, just have more community spaces in a shorter amount of time. So,
yeah.
yeah,
I
I
think
love
very
it.
much. I've said this a lot, and I'll say it. I'll say it until we start doing it. Is on, uh, on the same vein as I think most of the surface level issues in downtown and St. Louis specifically can be solved by just some marketing and behavioral economics. Just reframe all of these things that we talk about as problems. It's not that hard to counteract a business journal article that talks about all the negative things happening. Um, Most of these things, if you have the right mindset, are in fact opportunities that most other regions would kill for. Um,
Yeah.
I think the second thing is that, to your point exactly, the fastest way to get momentum in St. Louis is 1,000 small changes. Like paint the sidewalks, or I mean, paint the crosswalks, plant some trees, cut down the trees that are dead, right? And do it like next week.
Right, like
And
right now. Yeah.
like right now, like absolutely right now. And then by the way, film it, put it on YouTube, put it on Instagram, and show it to people and
Yeah,
have it live out there evergreen so people can see, oh my gosh, I have not been downtown in 6 months. This place looks totally different. And even if I'm seeing it from West County or Chicago or any of the other places where there's this St. Louis diaspora, people can see all of these things are happening. And what it creates is a belief and a certainty that someone's in charge, somebody cares, somebody wants me to be here because why else would you take care of a place? And when I go there, I can expect that things, even if they may not be totally, pardon our dust, right? Even if they're not totally clean, good things are happening. And that makes me hopeful for the future, which is, I think, the last point I would say about somewhere like Dallas, Austin, Houston, Nashville, et cetera, is that capital has freedom to move anywhere. And it's going to go to a place where it has a long term expectation of positive growth.
right.
The problem we have right now with our data, the most significant data, is a downward trend, which only exacerbates that lack of expectation for positive future. And the what how does a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single footstep? And we just got to start taking baby steps. And I think very quickly we'll remember how to run, because this is a city that knows how to run. We know how to manage. We know how to grow. We know how to keep things going. We just, like I said before, I think our attitude is can sometimes be conservative and closed minded and with a long memory of failure. And we've experienced that so much. I think we just need to remember how to win again.
Yeah, I agree. And then once you do it a couple times, it feels good and people will get behind that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
agree and yeah, appreciate everything that you share and I think just, continue to put ideas forth. Yeah, but ultimately I hope, some action is there from, a collective group and it can't be one person and it has to be kind of an overall approach and yeah, I hope we're moving in that direction.
I firmly believe that right now there are really exciting things happening right in the ether. And so long as we can pull the trigger and get them done in the next 6 to 9 months, I think people will be really shocked at what happens and comes to both downtown and I think elsewhere. But it's really, we're going to be have to break a few eggs to make some omelets. But I'm excited. I think if you can get excited about that, we can really get excited about the future here.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
Terrific.
thank you. This has been
Brittany,
a
it's been
fun
a pleasure.
conversation. I could chat with you for a few hours. I mean, it's a fun topic and yeah, I love St. Louis, love investing time here and yeah, going to continue to stay optimistic.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put a date sometime in the future for our next one. It's been wonderful learning about disco, everything you're doing in downtown, kind of your thoughts on how we're growing, and look forward to the next time we can chat. Have a great one.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.